Taylor, I'm home. This is Illiterate. My name is Evan.
My name is Taylor. I read some stuff this week.
I watched a movie. This week we are covering Being the Ricardos, the new film. I was lucky enough to check it out. Being the Ricardos is a biopic about Lucille Ball and her husband, Desi, the stars of I Love Lucy. So Aaron Sorkin, the writer behind The Social Network,
The West Wing.
The West Wing, recently, The Trial of the Chicago 7, which he also wrote and directed. This is his newest film. And I was a little taken with it by the end, I have to say. But I don't know much about Lucille Ball. Yeah. I don't know much about I Love Lucy. I saw the reruns as a child on Nick at Night. But I don't really know much about the show, who they really were, or even have a proper context for how that is so influential for modern day comedy even now. Yeah. So this was a really interesting movie to me. And I was really taken with it. So I can't wait to actually get into the story of the Ricardos.
One of the influential things outside of comedy, just there's even geological wavelengths that they were hitting. So when the show originally aired, when they cut to commercial, the water tables, like the water line and the groundwater, would drop in big cities because the entire country would be going to the bathroom at the same time.
Whoa! Well, you'd be like the guys at the water plant, like just watching it. Like they have the TV on, like, oh no, it goes to commercial. Everybody's flushing. Hold the line.
Yeah. But that's all really for that. We're going to talk about film and TV and really what they did.
Yeah, no, the film did a great job of trying to contextualize or at least introduce some ideas about modern day television and content production that they implemented and helped completely devise. So it planted some seeds in my mind. I went, oh, interesting. So this is where they really developed a multi-camera system where a live audience can see everything. Like that's floated in there as just a little piece of popcorn. We'll get into it, but. Yeah. There's a little things like that sprinkled all throughout to try to contextualize to you how influential they really, really were beyond just the show.
Mm-hmm. Just a bit on Aaron Sorkin before we dive into all of that. He had been working on this since 2015. He's mostly a writer, but then fancied himself the director on this year since he had directed Trial of the Chicago 7.
Right. Trial of the Chicago 7 had just come out around this time last year. Now, it's interesting looking at him as a director. They went to great lengths to put in this mockumentary post-interview with some of the surrounding characters of the story that they're telling. And it just did not contextualize or set up anything, dramatize anything in a way that I felt added to the story. I felt like it was a little bit distracting. And I felt like he almost distrusted that his scenes would get the themes across. And then he almost felt like he had to get these interviews in to contextualize it for the audience. So other than that,
right? Because I
was very much into his directing.
There is a lot that he is having to contextualize for the purposes of the film. It is 1 week where they're trying to make a single episode, and then there were 3 scandals that took place over 3 different years that he is also then saying happened in this same week. So it might be a bit much, or who knows what
the conceit of it is a little bit crammed. This is a lot of things that happened over a long period of time that he crammed into 5 days that we follow day by day. It was just in comparison to Trial of the Chicago 7, it felt like it was a little bit more uneven, and I think that comes from just the immense pressure that he put on himself to get this story right, even though he knows
love it so much.
Exactly. Yeah, this is Lucille Ball. It's I Love Lucy. I know that, and the reason we're doing the show is the younger audience isn't so acquainted, but this was one of the biggest pieces of content on the face of the planet for decades and decades and decades, and it is wildly influential beyond what we understand. That's what we're doing this episode about.
So let's break it open. I Love Lucy, the original show, 1951 to 1957, 6 seasons.
180 episodes. Almost 200.
Yeah.
That's a lot. That's not a lot, but it's not 2 seasons,
Yeah. It was the most watched in America for 4 of its 6 seasons.
Wow.
And also in terms of, were people getting sick of it? It ended its run at the top of the ratings.
No way.
It was number one, and it it ended.
Went out at the top, baby. That's the way to go out.
Yeah. And also it started strong. So within 6 months of the pilot, more than half of the country tuned in every week. So
Oh my gosh.
Lucille Ball had worked steadily in Hollywood in the 30s and 40s. She was the B-movie gal. Met Desi Arnaz on the set of Too Many Girls in 1940, and then they married soon after and pursued their separate careers. And that's the irony of why people are so fascinated by the show. It's the unreality of it all,
Right.
in that they're playing this couple and she's the housewife, but they never got to do that as a couple.
That honestly is where much of the underlying drama lies for this. This is a really intimate portrait of two amazingly talented people who intimidate the hell out of each other. They think so much of each other that is what will drive them apart. It was, by the end of it, is a really solemn, sad take on simple things. The movie is saying that she really wanted a simple life, a home, a simple home. She had houses, she had like three homes or whatever, but she never had a home. And eventually this movie works towards trying to demonstrate to you how ultimately she was only able to achieve this idea of having this home on screen at the set. That's where she was able to really meet him eye to eye, level to level in her own mind. And that's the sadness of it all, is these two people being driven apart because they're intimidated by each other.
Yeah, the only way they could be a real couple is when they were a fake couple.
Yeah.
On
it's beautiful.
screen.
It's beautiful, and I think that it takes somebody like Aaron Sorkin to actually get there. And I really felt like he got there, and I wish I could take those interview scenes out.
All of that stuff is based in reality. In their first year of marriage, Desi was playing nightclubs till 4 a.m. Lucy's going to B-movie sets at 5 a.m. They're just spending a few minutes together at dawn. And
that's in the movie, and it's honestly, I'm so focused on character, narrative, story that it takes a lot for me to step out of that and go, wow, this scene is lit beautifully. The images of them standing at the top of the mountain in the dusk of the morning, it was lit so beautifully, I started to cry. Because by the time this is given to you late in the film, you're already starting to understand how she is not getting these simple things that she wants, these very normal, almost like just droll things. And this is as close as she's getting as these two ships passing in the night, almost literally.
Yeah. But this is all happening before even the show is a idea that transfer of their mind. Yeah.
And they layer this while she is going through this week. She's thinking back to how did they get together and what was it about them, and so you get that moment actually very, very late in the film.
Because it was 11
some of their beginning moments.
11 years they were married before I Love Lucy goes on the air. Probably over $30,000 in correspondence. I think somebody estimated of those 11 years, really 3 of them were they actually together in the same place, because he's traveling around and she's working on the movies. So the start of her TV career comes from being dropped by RKO and MGM. She turns to radio, and she starred on a radio program called My Favorite Husband with Richard Denning. And this was actually based on a book. It's about this frustrated, scheming housewife whose husband is a banker in Minneapolis.
Based on a book?
She did it really well. She was also in 2 films with Bob Hope around this same time, which cemented her comedy skills and appeal to the public. CBS wanted to adapt it into a TV show and wanted her and Richard Denning. And this is the first big groundbreaking thing. She insisted that her real husband, Desi Arnaz, be Ricardo. And this was quite the controversy for CBS to say, people don't want to see a mixed marriage on TV. It seems like, well, that's dead in the water. Then how are they going to get this through? They performed it as a vaudeville version.
Really?
To prove, they had a whole thing that they did together to show, hey, look, studio audiences will come see us do something like this.
That's
They're not-
fascinating because
yeah.
they do take you through this in the film. They show you her doing a live performance of My Favorite Husband, and then being approached by CBS, and then there's a follow-up scene to that of her pitching this idea and then being very, very unreceptive to it, and so
Right.
they don't go into any of this, any further demonstration of
Right.
how it was viable. They really just leave it on a turn of command in her dialogue, outsmarting them basically in the room. So this is interesting that they actually went out and proved it.
No, it was a whole production
Wow! Oh my gosh!
to show
Oh,
the studio
wow.
that this was something. This was also when they start their co-company, Desilu, named after themselves.
Gotcha.
So that was the company that then put on this vaudeville show. Also, the precedent of women and then motherhood, because Lucy Ricardo is a hot mess.
Right.
And is not the perfect model housewife by any stretch of the imagination.
Right, that's where a lot of the comedy of the show is really derived. Is look at this crazy marriage. Look at her all over the place. What is she going to get into this week? And that,
yeah.
They do such an amazing job of so much of the thematics of this is trying to articulate the difference between that character and who she really was.
Yeah.
It was really astounding, and I think I personally really enjoyed Nicole Kidman in the role because I think that what they ordered there, you're playing I Love Lucy, you're playing Lucy, but no, you're playing actually the actress that played the character
Right.
who was very, very different and very, very, very smart. She just handled it just incredibly. I really got the difference between them and ultimately got the longing of this very, very smart, competent, talented person not getting simple things in her life. It really culminates into this very simple thing by the end.
So some of the other people you're talking about, like even in the artifice of the TV show, I found that the same people that worked on the radio show with her also then carried over to the CBS show.
Oh, really?
Which maybe also creates not the actors.
Mm-hmm.
The actors that play Fred and Ethel, they were not in the radio show.
Okay.
But the creative team, the Jess Oppenheimer,
Mm-hmm.
the producer / writer, Bob Carroll and Madeline Pugh, who were both writers, then they did all the episodes for I Love Lucy.
Gotcha.
As well. So it's kind of interesting that she's able to maintain these relationships outside of it.
It's also I think from a creative standpoint, a really good move too, because what she's doing without saying it on its face is that was radio. We need to do a TV show, and they're different things.
I had seen with the writers, they did pull some of the bits and some of the things from the show, but like you're saying, it's all physical slapstick comedy. That does not translate one iota from radio, but
they say in the movie that is that's kind of the reason they got the idea to do the show, is because while they're doing the live version of it, she is acting it out. She is doing mannerisms and doing her face, and she's performing for a crowd. And so they actually and they talk about where she got that from, an influence that she had watched years ago. So they try to show how this idea was sparked just before the executives even walk in. She is performing for a crowd, even though this is a radio show, and it's the first thing you think is man, she's really expressive for just doing a voice thing. The next scene, or the executives walking in being like, we've been here a couple times, and we see the way that you accentuate your voice. We think that belongs on TV.
Yeah, that is one of, as we move into the other sort of technological advances that they did, as you're saying, she wanted a live audience like the radio energy. And Desi was she needs this as well, but film studios at the time did not accommodate, even though this seems so commonplace, but there was no live audience, fire regulations, the buildings aren't coded for this, there's too many people, it just doesn't work. It was all canned laugh tracks. So they renovated 2 studios to make this happen.
Wow.
And so this is the origin of the live studio audience at this level for a sitcom, is I Love Lucy. And that's one of their claims to fame, which is their collaboration again, where you're it's I Love Lucy and she's everything. It's no, Desi is on the production side of it as well, making this happen.
They have to devise an entirely new camera system that doesn't obstruct the view of the live audience, and that allows them to go room to room on the studio set without it being so intrusive for there to be a live audience.
Yeah, so that's the other next thing, is the camera thing, which requires a little bit of technological explanation because it's kind of like physical logistics of it. So Philip Morris was the sponsor, and they wanted it to air weekly versus bi-weekly. So that means that she could not keep doing film. So they're fully locked into this. But they wanted it to film from New York because with live broadcasting, I don't know how much they get into the nitty-gritty of this in the movie. Do they at all?
Not much. No.
Yeah. It's necessary to understand then what happens with why it becomes so successful is because Philip Morris sponsoring it, they said, you have to film from New York because it's a live broadcast, so we're just going to film it. It gets beamed straight into the TVs of our Eastern and Midwest audience. And then a kinescope, which is basically like filming the TV screen, then goes to the West Coast.
Yes,
But
this is relegated to a line of dialogue coming from Lucille Ball being like, if not for Desi, the East Coast would be seeing this through a foggy window, basically.
Yeah. And that's usually what happened, but it was the other way where the West Coast would do that. They, first of all, live in Hollywood. They do not want to move to the East Coast. And like I said, then she's also, if she's already losing all of her other film endeavors, and they also didn't, Philip Morris is like, well, we don't want the East Coast to get a lower version.
Right.
So we're kind of at a sticking point here.
An impasse.
So, yeah. So Lucy and Desi, they say, here's the deal. We will film this using 35 millimeter film as opposed to just streaming it live where there's no film then for it. But this is going to cost more, but it's going to be higher quality. We will take off $1,000 a week for each of us as a pay cut to fund this. But we also then get ownership of the film stock.
Yep.
And they're like, fine. Philip Morris, the sponsor, is like, good, but you have to produce it yourselves.
Yep.
And they're like, cool, we have our own production company from doing the vaudeville stuff.
Yep.
We'll make it work. So back to what you were saying about them having 3 different cameras and doing all these different things to get it in front of a live audience. They could get it all at once. Usually this was the single camera and a laugh track.
Right.
So, but now they don't need the audience to react 3 different times at different angles. And this whole setup pretty much starts with them and becomes the standard in sitcoms where you have the 3 cameras and the live audience laughing, very little takes and retakes because, God, could you imagine with a live audience? I mean, like now we have to do this bit 4 different times and move the camera and set the lights differently. So that was the final thing with this is the lighting. So this was done, this kind of 3 camera thing. It's not like nobody had ever thought of it. It was on a quiz show called You Bet Your Life. But everyone had to be still. Right. Because you couldn't have them moving around the set because the lighting is all different. Right. So Desi and Lucy got this cinematographer, Karl Freund, I think is how you say his last name. He's German.
Is he a complete lunatic?
Well, he did not want to do television at all. Oh. So what he's known for is Metropolis, which is the Fritz Lang artsy thing, and then also doing Dracula and the Mummy in the 30s. Really a pioneer.
Yes. I know this dude. Yes.
One of the things he's known for, again, so ubiquitous, seems obvious. They called it the Unchained Camera, but literally just it's not on a tripod and it's not just facing one thing. Like, oh, you can pan it and tilt it, and you could put it on a dolly, and you could put it on a crane.
It goes here. It goes there. It looks over here. It looks up there.
It doesn't just stay straight on the whole time stuck. So he did all of that. But they
guys,
to him.
What if we move it? Melting minds.
They said, please come help us with this. And he said, sure. And he found a way to do the lighting across the whole set so that it would look the same for each camera and actors could move across the set and it wouldn't be all a disaster without just blasting infinite light on there. And then the final thing then, with all of this culminating, the higher quality film, the fact that they're not having to do this live and then kinescoping it, they could use the negatives of this high quality film for distribution of the prints. So there's no need to kinescope it. And then they own the rights to it. They own the film, which then CBS did not think about at all.
That's a huge deal, and I can't believe CBS just let that walk out the door. But I guess it takes time to learn these lessons.
Because the final thing, they invented syndication, or as we know it, reruns.
Thank God.
Because CBS is like, who would want to watch this again? And it's like, well, clearly everyone, because they made so much, I mean, they just dominated so much money The world's first rerun is from I Love Lucy, rebroadcasting some of the episodes.
Incredible.
Here comes the scandals and really the three things that we teased at the beginning that they condense into 1 week. But why would you need to do a rerun? It's because in the second season, she could not do all of the 39 episodes because she was pregnant and needed rest. And so this then becomes the first big scandal of the time. Hard to imagine now.
I see.
But there were strict moral codes that prohibited anything sexually suggestive. And so even the fact that there's a expectant mother implies the act of procreation, which is suggestive by the very definition of the word. So the whole word was banned. Pregnant couldn't even be said at all. They had to use expecting or the French term. But they pushed through. You know, the studio wanted to cover it up. They wanted to use tall chairs, put her behind furniture, and they were not having any of that.
Prop. Like
right.
God.
And again, with the vaudeville thing being like, look, people like this. This broke records in terms of because they were able to time it with when she actually gave birth was the same Monday that the episode aired where she gave birth.
What?
In the episode.
What?
Because, you know, they're still shooting it week to week, but they were able to line that up. So she was in, and they had said in the writing of the show, it's going to be a boy no matter what, but it just turned out that she also actually did give birth to a boy.
Oh, my God.
So they were like, I'm the best writer of all time.
I have done it.
But with this episode that showed on January 19th, 53, the second season, 44 million viewers, which was over 70% of all American homes.
Oh, my God.
The very next day, January 20th, 15 million less people tuned in to Eisenhower's first inauguration.
Oh, wow.
That's a crazy amount of people that just were like, nah, not that, but this, yes. Imaginary people and the birth of a child on TV.
Man, we love entertainment.
So that controversy of pregnancy was more the conservatism of the media at the time, but not necessarily the public.
Right. That's very much like where the drama lies is, well, if we can present the main controversy, which we haven't gotten to, if we can present this to the public, can we get the press to write about their reaction to this? But I'm a little bit ahead of ourselves.
Well, you're not ahead because that's the next thing we're discussing is the communist controversy, which did affect the public and their perception, perhaps. So this is September of 53. The pregnancy episode happened in January. She had gone under investigation by the committee that was responsible since the 30s of rooting this stuff out.
The House Un-American Activities Committee?
That is exactly it. She was cleared of wrongdoing, but 2 days later it got out.
Yeah.
So it wasn't going to be even anything. And, you know, one of their friends, Larry Parks, was destroyed by this committee. They really did snipe entertainment and Hollywood figures.
That's a lot of some underlying drama here is that she, in the film, she's already testified to the committee and been cleared, but now a publication is picking it up. But nobody else is. Publications aren't jumping on it to report the same story. Whereas usually if there was some traction to it, if there was anything to the story, they would reverberate that story and propagate it like we know how media works now.
Yeah.
That wasn't happening. And so that was where they were kind of living is, well, okay, the press can write what they want, but the public doesn't necessarily agree with it. Now, how can we merge the two? How can we get the public's acceptance to be what the press starts writing about?
As you said, in the press, Los Angeles Herald-Express in September, I found they used red ink to print the headline, which is kind of hilarious.
I didn't even know they had red ink, she says.
Yeah. And reporters storming Winchell, who is the guy who is known as an infamous, not a famous, but an infamous sort of investigative fool. He was the one who put it in. I had heard his name before in the deep recesses of my mind, and we had talked about him in The Plot Against America.
Oh, really?
Because he was also on Charles Lindbergh's negative train, lambasting him after World War II and the fact that maybe he was a Nazi sympathizer because he was so isolationist, and then it turned out he was.
Oh my gosh! Wow! So he was right. Wow, you knew.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
But he also then was big on the Red Scare.
Because he was right about Lindbergh. He's like, oh God, we got to be on the lookout.
Yeah, so
real.
why did this happen to Lucille Ball? She was registered to vote as a member of the Communist Party in 1936.
Right.
And denied all the involvement in any activities because she said she registered as a favor to her grandfather, and there really wasn't much else. I guess maybe there was an event that was at something that she knew about, but then it was found out that she wasn't there. Like, it was pretty loose.
Yeah.
It's
explained in the film as being a tribute in marking only, and that she says she never attended anything, never accidentally attended anything, that she really adored this man and did this one time in tribute to him.
And the thing is also, people had been blacklisted for much less to a degree. Like, she was registered, and it's like, oh, you're registered, goodbye.
Right.
So that had me looking into why wasn't she, and I was talking to my dad about this because he had said, oh yeah, she, like, so many people in that time got destroyed. And basically what I could find is people loved Lucy. Like, that was kind of like the FBI file, somebody that was looking into it, they said it seemed to be assembled by a Lucy worshiper. And Desi said that he was tipped off by J. Edgar Hoover about it beforehand, saying, oh,
Really?
she's gonna be interviewed, and there's nothing I can do. Hoover had actually written them a letter because he thought the show was funny.
Wow. Oh my gosh. See, and this becomes one of the most unbelievable things about the film, knowing that the conceit is a little bit forced. The film culminates with Desi's like grand act, which is basically having J. Edgar Hoover exonerate her over the phone in front of the live audience. And so that becomes the unbelievable thing, is that he has a connection to J. Edgar Hoover. Okay, Aaron Sorkin.
Yeah, that did not happen in such a grandiose fashion.
Okay, but he did have a connection with him. So that holds some credence, even though it might not be like to the T correct as the PR stunt set up as the climax of the film. But he does have a direct connection to J. Edgar Hoover, which seems completely unbelievable.
Mm-hmm. And Desi did appeal to the live audience, not to the viewing public, but told people, look, this is not her, you know her.
Yeah, that is what happens in the film. It's not live. It's not actually part of the show, but he is warming up the live audience. But then to cap it, and like beyond any doubt, he has like J. Edgar on the phone, which I'm like, what? Okay, well, okay, but then you see how Aaron Sorkin arrives there. Mm-hmm. He does have a direct line to J. Edgar Hoover, so it's not BS. He does appeal to the live audience and gives much of the same speech present in the film, presumably. It's just the two don't overlap, but it is in essence a bit true.
And like you said, as far as the parallels of audience to media, people just loved her, so it was okay. Yeah. That she had registered, that's fine, and then moving on.
And she never did again, and she never did anything. All right.
And she never voted. She literally never voted again, from what I know. Yeah, because it's like, I'm not dealing with any of this. So the third thing then is the Tabloid Issue, which takes place 2 whole years later in 1955. On the cover story of Confidential magazine is, Does Desi Really Love Lucy? This, to make sense of the show, happens in the midpoint of their 5th season, so their second to last season. Apparently, according to one of her agent's stories, said that she read the article in her dressing room and everybody was frozen on the set. And, what is she? And then she came out, tossed it, and said, oh, hell, I could tell them worse than that.
Oh, undercut it, baby. Throw it in the trash and move on.
But most people say, oh, this really was. I mean, everybody knew he was a philanderer and was out there, and that broke her heart. And kind of when it did become so public and so much ingrained into their life, a lot of people said around her that was like the crumbling from there on out.
The film does a great job of depicting that paranoia from her, not knowing, feeling like she knows, not having the evidence, and it does. The screenplay does a great job of planting things along the way that culminates to the end as a proof positive that he can't back out of. He can't get out of it. Yeah, and because by this point in the film, it's the last moments of the film, and up until this point, it's depicted as if you should maybe believe him, maybe he's not, maybe it is all the press, maybe it really is.
Yeah,
and then she has the proof. And it's really, really gutting. And then the movie ends with a couple lines about their divorce immediately after.
Mm-hmm. The final episode of I Love Lucy aired in 1957, and then there were 3 years where they did longer form. It was the Lucy Desi Comedy Hour. So these were hour-long things that had guest stars.
Okay.
And there were only 13 episodes of that, but it's kind of dubbed seasons 7, 8, and 9, but it's not really.
And her and Desi are still producing this together, even though they're not together.
And they're in it. Yeah.
Interesting.
But the day after the last one was filmed is when she filed for divorce in 1960.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, as we said, he was a lot of the producing genius behind some of this stuff, but then also infused with this sort of machismo.
Yeah.
So I'd read somewhere somebody had said to him at some point, like, to assuage him, it's like, you're the I in I Love Lucy. Like, you're the main guy. I don't know if
that
that's
comes
in the
out.
film
It does.
though,
It does come out
yeah.
in the film as like because Lucille wants Jess Oppenheimer to also give executive producer credit to Desi because he deserves it. Oppenheimer is basically like patronizing him by trying to like show like you have a title, you're the title character, and it goes really badly. So that is full on like a in the film, and going to just the rigidness and the rudimentary sense of where we were as a culture here, like how offensive that is to Jess Oppenheimer, but then how true it really is that he does deserve that shared credit. And the cultural aspects of everything here is really interesting to see that portrayed.
Also because part of the being the guy and being the strong man in the relationship, he is 5'9" and she's 5'7". So he actually wore 4-inch lifts in his shoes. Did they have that in there?
They didn't call any attention to that, and I think that's probably more because Javier Bardem is pretty tall. Yeah. So,
yeah.
But it's interesting the way they depict this is they have Jess Oppenheimer kind of appealing to Lucille Ball, trying to understand, like make her understand that like if it is true, if he does have an affinity for other women, it's not because the women, it's because of this thing between the two of you. You intimidate each other so much that at some point he has to feel like top dog. Because he's a machismo Cuban guy. That's just where he comes from. And that you're so big. You're so incredible. I love Lucy. You are Lucy. That at some point he has to spend time away from you to feel like he is who he is. Which is just, it's not an excuse. It doesn't exonerate him, but it is sad.
It's a fascinating relationship. Yeah.
And again, it goes to the point where these two people are perfect for each other. They absolutely adore each other, but they're too big for each other.
I saw interviews with Lucille's kids and grandkids, and they're just like, oh, yeah, they're in love always and amicable, and it wasn't this. It was just a entropic breakdown, and what can we do now? So the aftermath is what's interesting to me because there's even more. It's not like they just popped out of existence and disappeared into the void. Desi sold his shares of Desilu to her in 1962. Oh, wow. 2 years after the divorce. So she then she owned it all. She was the first woman CEO of a major Hollywood production company. Can you believe
That's
it?
Incredible.
In 1962. And so just a couple years before, they had both, when they were still both in it, sold back the rights of all the film that they had said, oh yeah, this is expensive, we'll pay for it, we'll lose our salary, So they sold it back to CBS for $9.2 million in today's terms, which then was the down payment. They added to their studio RKO Studios, which was the one that dropped her at the very beginning.
I did not know that. Oh my God, that should be in the movie. Because the RKO stuff is very present. Her getting like told she should go to radio from them is outright in the movie. So that's a little bit of a closing end, thematic there. I wish was present.
That's the same year as the end of I Love Lucy is when they buy it, and then that includes the 40 acres backlot in Culver City, which classic. I mean, King Kong, Gone with the Wind. It's all the like outdoor, strips that look like Chicago and New York. Batman was shot there. So at the time when they got this, then in 1957, they had 33 sound stages that they owned, which was 4 more than MGM and 11 more than Fox.
Oh my gosh, that's hard to even contextualize in modern day.
in 57
Oh my
that
gosh.
they were the largest independent and larger than the
studios. Yeah. Like,
So, and she's the first woman to head it then in 62 once Desi
Lucille for
gives up all of
president.
his stuff. So what she then does is crazy stuff with it. And I forget where in the world we had said this before, but I remember it because Desilu was responsible for having everything to do with Star Trek.
Oh my gosh. Right. I've forgotten about that. I did know that.
Maybe we had mentioned that in some
Right.
random episode. I forget what it was.
Oh man. Yeah. Oh yeah. That totally rings a bell.
But they were responsible for that, and then also Mission Impossible, which I think
Yes.
perhaps
We
also
did.
said.
Yeah. We talked about that too. Oh my gosh. This is crazy.
So both of those were in 66, and her company and her was at the helm of that. And then
Man, she knows what's good.
before that, they had a program that was an anthology of various things called Desilu Playhouse.
Mm-hmm.
And they ran the pilot for this guy who was not getting anything from the studios. And it was an episode he wanted to make of a show called The Twilight Zone.
No.
And once they produced it and it was on this show, it gave Rod Sterling the leverage to go to CBS and say, see, look, this is what I was talking about. And then they made The Twilight Zone.
You're kidding me.
So all that stuff is their production company, and most specifically her at the helm.
How many of these things did you just name that there's still like wild, like still thriving franchises?
Yeah, Star Trek, Mission Impossible, Twilight Zone. We're still, and then I like, it's hard if you're not in LA or whatever, but the 40 acres, all these sound stages, like everybody, it wasn't just the fact that like Desilu was involved in this stuff, but they rented out all this space for like films forever thereafter. So Paramount bought it and merged everything. Okay. And thus, obviously it's not that, but that happened in the late 60s. So it was a short run of her doing this, but even still.
I assume that they closed down all that stuff and that there wouldn't be anything left where they operated, right?
Well, yeah, Desilu became Paramount Television, and then CBS was, there's all these mergers. You can't keep track of it, but yeah. It's right there in Culver City. It's all still there.
I'm going on some tours.
Yeah. But the big thing that I was the most curious about, that again, my dad was like, she did not just perish. She had all this other stuff going on, not just the producerial stuff, but she's an actress. Yeah. She's Lucy. Everybody loves Lucy. And if it was at the top of its game when it ended after 6 seasons, where's she going? So after their hour-long special stuff, she went immediately in 62, starts The Lucy Show, which mixed things up a bit based on a book, Life Without George. She's a widowed wife, has this trust fund from her late husband, and gets into all sorts of shenanigans. And this was 6 seasons, from 62 to 68.
Wow.
The whole time she's running Desilu.
Oh, my gosh.
She is on The Lucy Show, and it won Emmys for the final 2 seasons and finished at number 2 in the ratings.
Wow.
6 seasons of this thing, The Lucy Show. Very similar to I Love Lucy, but she's widowed. It's all the stuff after she doesn't have a husband, which is very interesting.
That is very interesting.
Both her and Desi remarried, but in all the other stuff. So that went from 62 to 68, and then she had said, I want to do a show with my real kids. I don't want to do any of this fake business anymore. She liked that. So then the next show is called Here's Lucy, and this ran from 68 to 74, another 6 seasons.
I had no concept of this. Oh, really? I was like, okay, she went and did other things, but I didn't really assume that there would be much continuation of the Lucy character. I mean, it's Lucy, I assume.
Variations. Yeah. They're always named Lucy, but the Here's Lucy, this next one. Well, no. That was that one that featured her real children, and this is now they're teenagers. So it's the generation gap between she's a working mother and her teenagers.
Oh my gosh.
What happened in the second to the last season? She was in a skiing accident, and her leg was in a cast for the entire end of that season, which sort of reduced her slapstick, but they made it a part of the show.
Right. Okay.
Like the pregnancy thing, and this show at the end of this was the first time that any of her shows had fallen out of the top 10 in her whole career. Wow. But I mean, if you think about it, 23 years appearing regularly on TV, and this is now, I think it finished at 29, which is still not bad at all for all the stuff that's on there. But now we're getting into the 70s, and she's being replaced with Mary Tyler Moore and MASH and these very 70s TV shows. So the very next thing after she does is called Mame, and it was a musical film based on a Broadway show, which was based on a film, which was based on a book from way back. And it's about this widowed woman who's taking control of her deceased brother's son and house and everything. And this is her final theatrical performance. Got brutal reviews. Everybody hated it. Said she's playing a caricature of herself. She's trying not to look old when she looks old. And like, it was just a mess.
No.
So that was the last film thing that she did. And then she tried in 86 to do Life with Lucy, which was a comeback sitcom.
Oh, yeah.
Because Golden Girls was a bit, you know, she's a widowed grandma,
right.
she's
Golden
older.
Girls era.
But it was canceled after 2 months. They didn't even air all the ones that they had done. Yeah.
No.
So that was kind of her, you know, and she was in a TV movie or something, I think. But all of that stuff still is astronomically important as far as like, no, she just, I Love Lucy was not it. It was another 12 years of the Lucy TV show brand that was at the top of the charts.
Yeah, I had no concept of that whatsoever. I thought it was just, oh, I Love Lucy. That's all, you know, that's crazy. Now it's starting to contextualize a little bit more about how you see like spin-offs and, you know, prequels and different series surrounding a topic that you were familiar with. This is very, I mean, I'm from a creative standpoint, I'm really drawing some affinity for her of just being smart, of just understanding things are different and to reinvent it and lean into the characteristics of whatever is real and true at the time. It's like, well, let's use my husband. Let's use my kids. Let's do the, you know, like that was radio. Right. This is TV.
Let's really use my skiing accident.
Yeah, exactly. I really am appreciating just that aspect of it.
The unfortunate thing, though, and I think that maybe it's like, tying back to the themes of the movie, is she was always trying to be this thing that wasn't an act. Like she wanted to be a housewife and was playing that. And then people, maybe they got tired of that character or like over and over and over again. And then
because it didn't become
the Lucy.
Because it didn't manifest in her real life. So she kept trying to play it out on screen. But that magic was gone. When Lucy comes back and her husband is gone, I mean, that metaphorically should mean a whole lot to the heart of the person you're watching.
Yeah.
And again, she's trying to live this idea of a home in front of a camera, and it never actually manifests in reality.
I saw from a biography a quote from her, and she had said, of all the 30 or 40 films I had made, I could only find 3 or 4 scenes in those pictures that I cared anything about. And I discovered they were the domestic scenes where I portrayed a housewife. This is going into then her I Love Lucy housewife TV stuff. So it really was true that it's like what a tragic, interesting back and forth story of who she wanted to be but never.
It's almost sad. It's, you know, you have this image of what you want, but in all actuality, maybe what you were was a lot greater. And if you could have appreciation for what you really were in all truth and reality of it, then it wouldn't be so hard to let go of the things you didn't get in life. Because in all truth,
as we established, all of the entertainment innovations and standards and shows that we love and things that we come to forget completely were not just set in stone. Her and Desi were the ones that made it so. You know, hopefully you'd say, oh, well, that's my legacy. But at the end of the day, it's like, oh, I wanted to just go.
I wanted my husband at home with my kids.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible. I certainly grew a huge appreciation for Lucille Ball during this episode. So I hope that you guys did, our audience. Thank you guys for sticking with us. This was, I feel a little connected to her now. Now I want to go and learn a little bit more. So thank you guys for sticking with us. Thank you, Taylor, for this week's work.
Yep.
Guys, reach out to us on Illiterate. Let us know what you're reading. Let us know what you're excited about coming on. You never know when we'll do an episode about that thing you want to know all about. So hit us up at IlliteratePod on Instagram, and we will catch y'all next week.